I rise for purposes of an amendment, Madam President.
And please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. If the clerk could please call LCO number 1104. I move adoption of the amendment, waive a reading, and ask leave to summarize.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 1104, Senate Schedule C.
Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much, Madam President. When we vote on this amendment, I would like it taken by roll.
And it will indeed be taken by roll, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. What this amendment does is essentially it addresses the masks in school issue. And what it does is upon passage, it will devolve that power to the boards of education and any governing boards of the regional school systems throughout the state of Connecticut. To sort of head off at the pass, a question that I'm sure is imminent from Senator Lesser, my understanding in talking to several chairs of boards of education throughout the state of Connecticut and my district is that they already have anticipated the need for an exit plan, knowing that eventually the mask requirement, mask mandate in schools would come to an end. So my understanding is if the question is, gee, they don't have enough time to prepare, I would suggest that the vast majority of school districts in the state already have something committed to paper or a plan in place. They will move forward. If it's anticipated they'll move forward in 2 weeks, I don't see any great problem in their moving forward as this becomes the law of the land. That's A. B, the House still would have to act upon this because it would amend the underlying bill, so it would have to go back down to them. They could come in this afternoon, but my guess is at the latest they would come in tomorrow. It goes to the fundamental premise of should the state have a one-size-fits-all policy regarding masks in schools, and I would suggest, as Governor Lamont has suggested, that really we're at a stage regarding COVID-19 and the pandemic which I would suggest now has turned into an endemic situation. It is not the emergency that it was 2 years ago, and while there might be changes into the underlying virus itself, indeed, I think that we have learned to live with this virus, as dangerous as it is, certainly to those older in our society. One of my favorite presidents, Ronald Reagan, had a policy, trust but verify. So I have no doubts that Governor Lamont right now and over the past several weeks or 2 weeks, when he said that he wanted February 28th to be the time that power went to the boards of education regarding school mask policy. At this point in time, I have no doubts that he will instruct Beth Bye over in early childhood and the commissioners of education and public health to move along and issue their recommendations, but that indeed power will go to the boards of education in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today. Nonetheless, I feel better in moving forward with this amendment because that way we know that is the case. And as Senator Sampson brought to our attention so eloquently, while we are all assuming that that's what will take place, the letter of the underlying proposed bill before us states that the mask powers will still continue through June 30th. When we were explained why June 30th, what's magic about that time, it's my understanding that that's when the school year ends. So if for whatever reason, let's say there's a disagreement between a commissioner and the governor, and that happens. In fact, we've seen it with the Department of Public Health in the last year or so, once already. And I don't know the nuances of that or the details, but there's been a shift in who is in charge of that department. Indeed, there could be some butting of heads. There could be some disagreements. And indeed, this may not come to fruition on February 28th. So I had the greatest confidence in the boards of education to make thoughtful decisions expeditiously. I think they're already prepared to move forward. I think they have written plans, the vast majority. If indeed they were caught unawares, they can simply leave the mask policy in place until they can gather their membership and make a different decision. But again, I'd like to trust but verify. By passing this amendment, we will indeed know that the boards of education have the power, which I think that, again, that government closest to the people, the elected people to the Board of Education, the people that cared so much just this last fall to put their hats in the ring and run for office, whether they're Democrat, Republican, it varies in each community. But these are the people that eat, sleep, and breathe education issues, their students, their pupils. They have close communication with the superintendents of schools. They meet with parents weekly, I'm sure. They hear from them, and they can make the decisions they feel best for the school children in their communities. The last thing I'll state for the record is, in some ways, and it was brought out by, I was really impressed by Senator Fazio's remarks, highly detailed and researched, and I complimented him on one of the best maiden speeches on the Senate floor that I've ever heard. I gave some words, actually much lengthier than I was instructed by my minority leader at the time, Senator John McKinney, but it touched upon public health, and I went into a brief history as to the Spanish flu, and it was very close to that because my great-grandparents were both killed by the great Spanish flu influenza epidemic of 1918. Which, even though it's called the Spanish flu, if you look at the real deep history, it originated in the state of Kansas and went with our troops over to Europe when we entered World War I, and then it spread from Europe then back to America. And my family at that time came from Philadelphia, and as the Spanish flu came back from Europe, came back with some of the returning troops. And Philadelphia took it upon itself to have a bond parade for all the returning veterans. This was before the war was won by the Allies. But in that fall, because of the parade, so many thousands and thousands of people in Philadelphia got the Spanish flu and died. Thereby, my grandfather was orphaned with his sister at a very young age. So sensitive to these issues, but that was an odd, like an Andromeda strain for those of you who know the book. It didn't really affect the elderly or the young. It hit people like in their ripe middle age, their younger middle age, and they were healthy, and that's how the Spanish influenza hit. This one seems to be a little bit more predictable, and thank God, knock on wood, it seems to spare our young people to a great degree, unfortunately disproportionately impacting our frail elderly and those that have comorbidities. So I have full faith in our local officials and the boards of education, and I would urge my colleagues to support this amendment. Thank you, Madam President.